I'm going to show you how you convert from standard to vertex form. We're going to use completing the square to do this. So if you remember your completing the square steps, some of this should look familiar. Remember, when you solve by completing the square, you can't have an a value other than 1. You should also be checking that here. In this case, a is 1. Since a is 1, we don't have as much work to do. I can skip to the next step. Now what I'm going to do is just rewrite the equation. I'm not doing really anything yet. All I'm going to do is rewrite this with some space. So all I've done is put a space after the b value and a space after the c value. That's all I've done. I haven't done anything tricky yet. Next, b over 2 squared should hopefully look familiar if you've solved by completing the square before. We're still going to use b over 2 squared in this problem. B is 1, so you plug that in and find b over 2 squared. When you square a fraction, you just square the numerator and you square the denominator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 1/4 in the first space only. Just start there. So I have this positive 1/4, so I'm going to add 1/4 to the first part of this, into that first space. Now I need you to think about this very quickly. When I put a plus 1/4 in this equation, I have changed the entire thing. This will no longer look like the parabola that I was given, and that's a problem because this should still be the same parabola. So if you were to put a positive 1/4 in that space, to make sure you're not changing any of the values, you need to put a negative 1/4 in the second space. That way, you are not changing anything. I know this seems pointless because I'm adding it and subtracting it back out, but you need to make sure that nothing is actually changing in the problem. Next, we're going to factor. So you may be looking at this like, I have no idea what two numbers multiply to 1/4 and add to 1, but you don't have to think about it because it is always the number that I just put a box around and then put arrows next to. 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1. So your two numbers are 1/2 and 1/2. And now, because I have the same factor twice, I can rewrite them squared. So we're almost there. The last thing I need to do is just combine those last two numbers and I'm done. Now I have a whole number minus a fraction. So I'm going to put the whole number over 1 and then make a common denominator by multiplying the top and the bottom by 4. So -6 became -24 over 4. Subtract 1 over 4 and you would get -25 over 4, and now we have vertex form. And there you go. So what I'm going to do is graph this parabola, and so I'm going to take this a step further and find some other things so that I am able to graph it. First things first is the vertex. Now, you could have used your standard form, done negative b over 2a, and plugged it back in, but because we just went through the trouble of converting to vertex form, might as well use it. If you know your transformations, hopefully you know that the plus 1/2 inside means that we moved left 1/2, and the minus 25 over 4 outside means we moved down 25 over 4. Left 1/2, down 25 over 4 would be this point. So that is our vertex. Next, we're going to talk about the intercepts. Now, you can always use vertex form if you want to find your intercepts. But if I have standard form already, I know that some things are easier to find in standard form than vertex. Starting with the y-intercept, that should be the easiest thing ever if you have standard form in front of you, because it's just your c value. So the y-intercept is -6. Now, to find the x-intercepts, what you can do is set your vertex form equal to 0 and solve for x. That is always an option. But if I have standard form in front of me, I personally like to factor. I think that's the quickest method. So I'm going to look at my standard form and decide if factoring is an option. If it's not, then you can use the quadratic formula, or you can go back to your vertex form if you want. So looking at this, I would need two numbers that multiply to -6 and add to +1. And those two numbers do exist, so I'm going to go ahead and factor. Now remember, when you factor, you need to actually set your factors equal to 0 and solve for x. My computer's starting to lag. All right, so if you have x plus 3 is equal to 0, that means x is -3. If x minus 2 is equal to 0, that means x is 2. Oh gosh, this dumb computer. That's a -6. All right, so my y-intercept is -6. I have my x-intercepts. We found the vertex earlier. Just one more note, the axis of symmetry would be x equals -1/2, since that was the x value of our vertex. And this is what your graph would look like.